Hello, it's Tom Donald from the London Contemporary School of Piano. Today, we're going to learn how to use diminished chords on the piano. And if you're a fan of diminished chords, you should head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, to claim your free resources kit, which is on our website. And what's in the resources kit are a bunch of diminished chord exercises that will accompany this video as a worksheet. And you should check that out. It'll help your practice. So, diminished chords. I'm playing them right now. What are they? What are they all about? They have a very distinctive sound quality, don't they? There is really nothing else quite like it. And they all sound a bit the same, really. They all are pretty much musical equivalents of each other. And once you've heard one of them, you've heard them all, really. And there's reasons for that. That's because it has quite a quirky relationship with other diminished chords. Diminished chords are one of the few chords on piano that invert onto themselves. So when you put them in an inversion, you end up with another diminished chord. So a C diminished chord is the same as an E flat diminished 7 chord, which is the same as an F sharp diminished 7 chord. So yeah, if you see on sheet music an F sharp diminished 7 chord, it has exactly the same notes in it as a C diminished 7 chord. Just a different inversion of the same thing, which is the same also as A diminished. The reason for that, why is that the case? You can't say that about a C major chord. The first inversion of a C major chord is still a C major chord. It's not anything else. But the diminished chord is entirely symmetrical within the octave. It has an absolute symmetry to it. Despite its dissonance, it's actually very symmetrical. You've got a whole bunch of minor third intervals. There's a minor third, there's a minor third, there's a minor third, and then I add another minor third, I get the octave. That's the 5-note version of it with the octave. I'm using all of my fingers. That's a nice little stretchy exercise. So you're stacking minor thirds on top of each other to create a diminished 7 chord. So here's an easier way to do it. If you find it hard to find minor thirds, you can just think of 3 semitones up from each note. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's do that starting on a C sharp. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's how you can find them. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. If you find it really hard to do it at first, some students do find it hard to find these shapes. Another way is you can just start with a 3-note diminished triad. And you can do that from the minor. You play a C minor, all you do is drop the 5th note down a semitone, and you have a diminished triad. And then to turn it into a diminished 7, you add another minor third. So that's just a standard diminished triad, and that is the full diminished 7. I like to call it a full diminished chord rather than a diminished 7. I like that title better, full diminished, because it sounds full. It's got that fullness to it that perhaps the diminished triad doesn't have. So that's how you formulate and find diminished chords. And yeah, there actually aren't that many of them because they all invert onto themselves. See, C sharp diminished inverts onto E, inverts onto G, inverts onto B flat. Bit of theory going on there, I know, but it's the shape you want to learn. You want to get the shape under your fingers. And do head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, to get the resources kit, because there's the diminished pack inside that resources kit, which can help you practice these chords. So now let's put them into context. That's the key with diminished chords, is they've got to have context to them, because by themselves they sound very dissonant, and they've got a very, I sort of think of Charlie Chaplin running on the stage, Those old silent piano films. So we got to give them a bit of context. So I'm going to create some diminished chord progressions that are quite fun to play around with. Let's just start with one that, this is inspired by Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. Because for the melodrama, what Queen often do, and you hear this in opera as well, not just in Queen, but you go from major to diminished, back to major. You think of the end of Bohemian Rhapsody. That bit there, going from F major, F diminished to F major. By the way, I do have a Bohemian Rhapsody tutorial video on our YouTube channel. You should check it out if you want to learn the chords of that piece. Quite a few. So we're going to do this Bohemian Rhapsody inspired exercise where I'm going to play major to diminished, and then I'm just go up in semitones, play major to diminished, and I'll arpeggiate it gently as if we're singing Bohemian Rhapsody or something. Now on D flat. Whoops, made a mistake there. I went to a diminished chord too soon. F sharp, major, then the diminished. G diminished, G major. This is a good exercise because it clarifies that relationship between major and diminished from the triad. So it just gives you a bit of context. And yeah, it will take a while to get those shapes. There are some shapes that often trip people up. So like B major to B diminished, that's a good one to look at. But look at them all really closely. Work them out on the piano. And if you're really struggling, take that next step. By the way, if you're struggling, a whole bunch of MIDI keys and notes flashing up on the screen are not going to help you. Sorry, I mean, we have research to back that up. No one's ever become a great pianist from flashing notes on YouTube. If it worked, I'd do it, but I just know it doesn't work. What does work are strategies in your practice when you're sitting down at the piano. And so one strategy, the one I mentioned earlier, is go from C major to C minor, and then there's your diminished triad. So it's quite easy to find from the minor, isn't it? Because you're just taking that top note down a half note. So yeah, that's a good little strategy to find it. And then major, diminished, major. And then if you're feeling more confident, the full octave major, the diminished 7 with that extra note there to the major. By the way, a question I get a lot is, why do we call it a diminished 7? Because isn't that the 7th? Or that, the dominant 7? Well, it's because the 7th has also been diminished. That's why I like to call it full diminished, because I think that just is a more, almost easier way to think of it. It's a full diminished chord. Okay, so here's another really good exercise with diminished chords, and this is inspired by the old jazz classic Ain't Misbehavin' by Fats Waller. How does it go again? I'll remind myself. I'm in the land of diminished here. Got to remember the melody. Here it is. It's this. This song. Yeah, lovely tune. So I've created a chord progression that's similar to that, because that chord progression's great because there's loads of passing diminished chords in it. So I called this exercise a pack of diminished chords, and you can find it in our free resources kit. If you go over to our website, you can download your pack of diminished chords in our resources kit. You got C major, C sharp diminished. This is quite nice, right? In fact, I'll just do it in this simple format first. Just these 4 chords: C, C sharp diminished, D minor, G, And that C sharp diminished 7 leads nicely into the D minor. Now we're going to add another semitone above the D minor. We're going to go to an E flat diminished 7. And we get this. We got C, C sharp diminished, D minor, E flat diminished, C major. I'm going to add an extra chord for a bit of fun. An E augmented chord. There's an E major chord, and an augmented is where you get the 5th note and you raise it. You augment it by a semitone. Then to F major. And then we're going to go to an F sharp diminished. So let's just do a recap of all of that. So what was it I did there after I went to the F sharp diminished? Let me take you through this, because some really cool applications of the diminished chord here. I had the F sharp diminished 7. I couldn't help myself. I had to give it a shake. That's a cool way to use a diminished chord too, is just give it a shake. If you feel your hands aren't strong enough to give it a shake, by the way, just imagine you're in the freezing cold. That can help. The tremolo. Then we got the C major. This is what I did. Then I went to a G diminished 7 and I put the A in the left hand, like a slash chord thing. And I'm going to talk about what that exactly means a little bit later, but this is what we're doing for now. We've got the G diminished shape in the left. Then I'm going to go down a semitone to the F sharp diminished 7 shape with the D in the bass. And then the F diminished shape with the G in the bass. And then I finished on a nice, happy C6 for a nice resolution. So let's do all of that now. And I get this. I'll go slowly. Let's do that again. Let's give it more bass. Beef up those diminished. Now, if you can take a little bit of extra theory, I'll tell you what was going on with those slash chords. I'm quite happy for you to think about this as a G diminished 7 over an A. But if you want to get a bit of extra geekiness, and your head can take it, it's actually, there's a chord inside a chord here. I can actually refer to this as an A7 with a flattened ninth. Because an A7th with a, well, this is an A7. See, there's the G and the E that would be in the A7. There's the C sharp that would be in the A7. And here is the B flat that would be the flattened 7. Oh, sorry, the flattened ninth. So that's actually also, we can call it a G diminished 7 with an A in the bass, or we can call it an A7 with a flattened ninth. Just like we can call this, we could call this an F sharp diminished 7 with a D in the bass, or we could call it D7 with a flattened ninth. D, F sharp, A, C, that's your D7, that's your flattened ninth. And that's what I'm also doing here. I'm also adding a flattened ninth to a G7. G, F, A flat, that's your flattened ninth, B, and D. It just happens to be the F diminished shape. So what that means is that these diminished chords can also create flat ninth chords. So if you just find any diminished seventh chord and bring the bass up a second, that actually turns it into a D7 flat ninth. Pretty cool bit of theory there. Or another way of doing it, you could have a C in the bass, start a third higher, a major third higher, turn it into a diminished 7, and that is a C7 flat ninth. So you can get 2 chords for the price of 1 there, which is quite helpful. So let's do that pack of diminished chord exercise in the key of F now, and then we might go up a fourth and do it in the key of B flat major, and it is all in our resources kit on our website, so you can check this stuff out. Yeah, we're having some diminished fun today. All right, in the key of F now. Now in the key of B flat. So a couple of good diminished tricks there. Now I was going to sign off and finish, but I can't help myself. I want to show you something else with diminished chords, because they don't just have to be bluesy and jazzy. They're used a lot in classical music as well. And probably one of my favorite composers for the diminished chord. I mean, I love how Beethoven uses the diminished chord, actually. I love how Bach uses the diminished chord. Actually, I love how they all use the diminished chord. But I'm going to talk about Chopin, because he uses the diminished chord, and Liszt as well. Chopin and Liszt. Let me briefly talk about them. They use the diminished chord to get themselves wherever they want to go. So a lot of people think when you're composing music that there's some rules if you want to change the key or modulate. You know, I'm playing in D major and I want to go to A flat major. Oh, there must be I have to follow a very specific procedure to get to that key. Not true. The diminished chord can take you wherever you want to go. It is a super transporter of a chord. It can transport you wherever you want to go. Now, in the Ain't Misbehaving example, it's a passing chord to add some color to the music, and it's a really effective passing chord. But it's also a transporting chord. So I'm going to just make up a mock Chopin-esque Liszt-like piece, and I'm just going to randomly change key. So I'm going to start in, I don't know, any key. Let's say D major. Now I'm in the key of A flat major. Diminished chord. Now I'm in the key of E flat major. Diminished chord. Now I'm in the key of B flat major. Diminished chord. Now I'm in the key of B major. So the diminished chord can take me to pretty much wherever I want to go. And composers like Liszt thought, well, I'm going to really draw this out deliberately. And he uses the diminished chord in very virtuosic ways. And one way he'll often use it is through double octaves. So this is a really fun thing to practice. Get your notes from any diminished chord. And we're going to descend on the notes of the diminished chord here. It could be a C or an A or an F sharp diminished chord, because we know they're all the same. And I'm just going down in minor thirds. And I'm just going to play it in octaves like this, double octaves. Foot on the pedal. Lots of pedal. This guy was the Hendrix of piano, right? Now we're gonna now just go as fast as we can and as loud as we can, but still try and maintain some control. It's a cool trick, isn't it? What about on C sharp? What about on D? There's Liszt's bread and butter for you there. I'm making him sound a bit melodrama. There is some real magic to how he does it. If you want to hear some great examples, check out Totentanz. It's a piece he has for piano and orchestra. It's called Dance of Death, I think is what it translates to. And it was considered at the time by the critics as devil's music. And it's pretty spectacular virtuosity. And I don't think anyone had experienced or seen pianists play double octaves so fast on a piano with an orchestra. And yeah, it's just basically a good 15 minutes of piano shredding. So you can check out that piece on YouTube. There's loads of great performances of it. But that's you can also hear how those composers, Liszt, Chopin, the late Romantics, used the diminished chord to transport themselves to wherever they wanted to go. You could just change key. And then one moment you hear just beautiful music in a major key that's melancholic and it's just gorgeous, and then diminished chords to instigate change. And to finally finish off with, I've got one more diminished exercise for you. I can't help myself. This is another really cool warm-up exercise, great for finger independence, that uses the diminished intervals, and it will drive your neighbors up the wall. But, you know, sometimes we just have to do that for the pursuit of our progress. So here it is. I'm going to get the C diminished again. Now with my first and third finger, I'm going to play these two notes. My second and fourth finger, I'm going to play these two notes. And my third and fifth finger, I'll play these two notes. Really relax your wrist when you do this. It's not easy. This is a hard exercise. Go really slowly. Relax your wrist. And you can crawl up in semitones with this exercise. Great for building good finger relationships with moving different fingers through the keyboard, particularly the combinations of the twos, the 1 and the 3 and the 2 and the 4. It's a great cognition piano exercise. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to head on over to our website to get the pack of diminished chord exercises, which are in our resources kit. And have fun practicing these exercises. Let us know how you get on in the comments. I'm just noodling around on diminished chords now. But noodling's important to me because, you know, I get ideas from my noodling. I get musical ideas. I get ideas for these seminars. But for now, I'm going to sign off. So head on over to our site, get the resources, or get in touch with us, and I'll see you soon.